What you know, Joe?
I don't know nothing.
What you know, Joe?
Tell me something.
Welcome back to the Joe Wallenstein What You Know, Joe podcast. I'm your host, Vince Gonzalez, co-host Vince Gonzalez, and we are here, of course, with Joe. Joe, I'm going to read you something, and then we're going to talk about this. Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to talk to a lawyer for advice before we ask you any questions. You have the right to have a lawyer with you during questioning. If you cannot afford a lawyer, one will be appointed to you before any questioning if you wish. If you decide to answer questions now without a lawyer present, you have the right to stop answering at any time. So what are your thoughts on that?
I quit.
I was hoping you were going to say that was your experience being thrown into the back of a Crown Vic in New York City, but you know.
Oh, we're not going down that
okay.
road. I suspect you want to know how I got involved in writing about the Miranda decision.
I want to know about that. And also you and I talked earlier because you mentioned that there was a recent development in the world of law as it relates to this. And so I thought it was a good timely topic to talk about. And also because you've written it. Show us the book. Let's see the book. You wrote a book. So tell me let's start from the beginning. What was your inspiration to write this book and what is it covering?
Well, funny way to get into it, but when the night Miranda was killed, I was sitting in a Brooklyn apartment listening to my heavy, clunky earphones, writing on a yellow pad with pencils, which is about short of a chisel and stone. That's about as prehistoric as it gets. And at 2 a.m, the news said Ernesto Miranda, the man for whom the United States Supreme Court decision was named, was killed in a fight in a bar in Phoenix. And I thought, oh, gee. And they said when the police arrested the suspects, they did not have their Miranda cards. They found it in the pockets of the man who they had just killed. And the police read the suspects their rights in the name of the man they had just killed. And I thought, whoa. I said, if a writer, I'm sitting here writing all night. And if I just wrote that, everybody would just roll their eyes. But that's what actually happened.
Unbelievable. So
I got interested in it. And what happened was the more interested I got, the more research I did. And I went down some blind alleys. I spent 2 days researching. Turned out there was a lady with fruit on her head named Carmen Miranda. That was a waste of time. But eventually I tracked it down. I could go to the New York City Library. I could go to the Brooklyn Library. I could go to It became apparent that I couldn't do it long distance, and that one of the things I had to do was speak to his attorney, a fellow named John Flynn. John Flynn, if you look, American Heritage magazine did an article about the 10 people who have changed your lives, of whom you have never heard. And John Flynn was one of them. John Flynn was a very successful defense attorney in Phoenix, Arizona. And his firm, Lewis and Rocha, had agreed to do 2 indigent defendant cases a year. One of them was Miranda, which nobody wanted to touch. But he, who loved controversy and conflict and was a very energetic guy, he suspected that the time was right and that the Warren Court might be willing to listen to a Bill of Rights case. Now, what does that mean? First of all, in 1962, it was possible to be taken from your home, accused of a crime, kept in prolonged police custody, denied legal counsel, and nothing the courts, the lawyers, or the police did would have been illegal. That's just the way it was.
Wow.
Well, what happened was the confession, which was the backbone of police work in those days, was always tainted. A lawyer would come in and say, oh, yeah, sure, my client confessed. They beat him to within an inch of his life, and blind the jury to the fact that they had other evidence. So a lot of guilty guys were going free, and a lot of innocent people were getting convicted. It was a mess. But what was so interesting is in 1962, in Phoenix, Arizona, that was the birthplace of the conservative movement of Barry Goldwater, and extremism in the pursuit of liberty is no vice. So it seemed like an odd place to have a case that would take the least worthy and have the whole government turn itself inside out. The question was not, was Miranda a good guy or a bad guy? Was he guilty or innocent? The question was he treated fairly? It's amazing when you think about it, that the whole government would hang its hat on, was he treated fairly?
Mm-hmm.
So I realized that the only way I'd get to any of those answers was to find John Flynn. Wasn't so easy to do. And then one day, it's better to be lucky than smart. One day I call a place called Flynn, Goldstein, and Mason, and a guy with a gruff voice answers the phone. Hey, Philip Goldstein here. Hey, Mr. Goldstein, not for nothing, but I'm looking for John Flynn. Oh, he says, you want to talk to John? He's right here. And he hands the phone to John Flynn. I said, Mr. Flynn, I've been looking for you for God knows how long. I said, you the guy who argued Miranda? He goes, yeah. I said, if I get down to Phoenix, will you talk to me? He goes, sure. Long story short, I was doing a picture in Mexico. The executive producer loved the idea. He and I went over to meet with Flynn. First thing is we go to see Flynn and we get the address, and it's this one-story red brick building. It looks like, I think we're going to be, Lewis and Roke are going to be 20 stories of mahogany and glass. We go in there, it's on Saturday morning, nobody around. And the first thing I see on the wall is the Teamster logo, wagon wheel and the horse's head, right? I'm thinking, this cannot be right. But we're there. And so we walk down the hall and there's one door open, and I walk in and here's this guy, big guy, and he's wearing the Teamster shirt. He's got an ashtray in front of him full with smoldering cigarettes, right? I said, this can't be right. I think we're in the wrong place. He says, who are you looking for? I said, I'm looking for John Flynn. He goes, you found him. I couldn't believe it. We went in. Of course, you had to take a break every 20 minutes because you couldn't see the walls for the cigarette smoke. And I interviewed him, got it on tape. We sat probably 3-4 hours with breaks. It was a Labor Day weekend. Bob, the guy who paid for the trip, the executive producer, Bob Stambler, he had to go back to LA. Flynn says, if you're around, come out. I have a ranch out in Gilbert, Arizona. Come on out. Can't record me, but I'll show you where I live and we'll walk around. Because he didn't really like going in too deep about his family life, which I understood. Once I understood he was married 5 times, then I could understand why he didn't want to do it. So I went out there, and it was a pecan ranch, and his colleagues used to refer to it as the nut house. And I went out and I walked around and talked to him. And when I went back, I said, look, can I come back? I want to, can you get me Miranda's letters from you? Yes. I go home. 3 months later, he drops dead, reaching for a pack of cigarettes under the front seat of his Porsche at the bottom of the ski slope.
Wow.
I'm the only guy in the world who can tell his story. When I was there, I said to him, Mr. Flynn, you must have been asked about the case 1,000 times. He said, oh, yeah, I was. He said, but Joe, you're the only guy ever asked me about the dues I paid. And I paid.
Wow.
So I began to realize that when I pass from the scene, that story goes. And it sounds a little grandiose, but I really did think that if I was chosen to write the story, I had to write the story. Why me, right? So that's the background of it. And it came along at a time, they thought Earl Warren was vice president, Kansas, Republican, conservative, California, right? Well, ironically, in the years that Miranda's been a thing, all the Supreme Court justices who were conservative would not allow it to be overturned. Not Earl Warren, not Warren Burger, not William Rehnquist, not John Roberts. Because Flynn said to me, it's one of those unique cases where it serves the conservatives because it's very much about the Constitution, and it serves the liberals because it's very much about protecting the poor, the uneducated, the disconnected. It's one of those rare instances that both sides were served. So, and the other thing that Flynn was right about, he says, look, if the confession goes away, the police are going to have to do more scientific evidence, DNA, voice pathology, forensics. When he turned out to be right. If you go into court with a confession today, number one, it sticks, and number two, it's icing on the cake. So when I came back to Hollywood, I wrote a script, got optioned twice. I actually, by another strange series of events, got to pitch to Brad Pitt, who was interested for a full 15 seconds. And they call those elevator meetings. You think you sold them, and by the time you get to the car downstairs, they've passed on it, right?
He's got a lot of kids too.
He hung in a little longer than that. And so finally, as time went by, I thought, you know what? Just sit down and write it, Joe, to the best of your ability. Now, it's a fiction novel. Why? I want to make a movie. I don't want to do I'm not a lawyer, so it's not some dry legal treatise. It's about these two very different guys from opposite ends of the human social spectrum who came together in one blazing moment of legal history, and how that moment affected them and all Americans. It's kind of a unique story, and it's the last great true story of last century. You know about Roe v. Wade, you know about Brown. Very few people, even lawyers, don't know about what happened.
So you have a fictional story, wrapped in the actual events.
Correct. In the book, in the back of the book, is a transcript of my discussions with Flynn. Right? Because I took what he told me and tried to put it in dramatic form. He was a controversial guy. He lied about his age. He went into the Marines at 17. Got himself shot up, got out of the hospital, went back into the war, came home, didn't know what he was going to do, but a very hyper guy, very aggressive. Went to school, got his degree, joined the district attorney's office. And in those days, when things slowed down, he would strap on a gun and go out with the police and look to find bad guys. I mean,
wow.
One of those high energy guys, right?
Yeah.
He left and he wanted to start his own practice. And along came a case of a woman named Evelyn Smith, who was the wife of a steel manufacturer, and she was kidnapped. And somehow Danny Marsden was the guy who kidnapped her. The husband paid $250,000 ransom. And they pretty much had Marsden dead to rights. He reached out to Flynn, will you defend me? Flynn was looking to defend anybody, right? He had just gone out on his own. Well, he got Marsden exonerated, and Marsden repaid him by stiffing him on his fee, right? But the case caught the eye of Lewis and Roca, and they said, this is a guy we should have with us, not against us. And so he got involved with this very prestigious firm. But along the way, he challenged the Arizona Republic. He brought tax evasion charges against them, which didn't sit well, as you can imagine, with the Arizona Republic, because that was conservative Arizona newspaper. And he was just a hard-driving, hard-living guy, but good at what he did. But the hard sell for Flynn it wasn't like Miranda was some good guy, poor thing, misunderstood. He was everything they thought he was, Miranda. Bad guy. Had a horrible life. And he got the attention of the Supreme Court. And he was the first one up to plead for Miranda. What he guessed was, and he took a big risk, because it was always, what should you argue before the court? Failure to get an attorney or right of self-incrimination. One of his research assistants found out that Warren's own father had been murdered when he was district attorney of Kern County. And he sent his detectives out and they beat a confession out of the guy. And Warren wouldn't use the confession because of the way it was obtained. Killers of his father went free.
Wow.
Then went to court when they said, would you say this is a Sixth Amendment case or a Fifth Amendment case? Flynn said, Fifth Amendment. And that was the right thing to say, because that's what connected with Warren. Had to be done correctly. So, long way around to Joseph Alito recently said that the police can't be sued for not informing the suspect of his rights. Well, Flynn's whole premise was, if you're indigent, unknowledgeable, frightened of authority, who's going to tell you what your rights are? The only one who can is the officer who's come to arrest you. Because one of the things Miranda said when the cops came to his door, he didn't know if he had the right to tell him to go to hell. So he went with the cops, and they shuffled them from one jail to the next, and he couldn't get out.
Yeah.
So it's a piece of Americana that I just think people ought to know about. They can agree with it, disagree with it, like it, not like it, but they ought to know about it. And the truth is, I just still, look, excuse me, it's a fiction novel. Did I take license? Yes, sir, I did. Did I alter timelines? Yes. I changed names because there were three people: John Treadaway, John Flynn, John Frank, who was an appellate. How many guys are you going to call John? So I changed Treadaway's name to Daniel, right? So it's those kind of accommodations.
Right.
I took great pains not to dig into his 5 marriages. I didn't want to stir the pot with his children. So I created a fictitious lover because he was a player in every sense of the word. This guy lost a fortune in Las Vegas, used to search for emeralds in the Amazon. I mean, he was, and he died at 52, I think.
Wow.
One of those hard driving guys.
Wow.
So I thought it's an interesting character, ego driven.
Right.
But good at what he did and changed the face of the legal system. One of them, he didn't do it alone. But one of them.
Right, for sure. That's a great story. And do you have any sense of where we will go forward on this? If you think that we will not, embrace this ruling with the same gusto as we have?
They've been chipping away at Miranda since the day after it passed, but they've never really been. But the scary thing about what just happened, not with Miranda, but with Roe v. Wade, they just upset settled law. Well, that was the basis. You ask any lawyer, they'll never overturn Miranda. It's settled law. Hello, And one of the things that it did, it's easy to say, it said a guilty guy got free. If you could frame it that way. One of the things it did was it brought uniformity to police work. 1962, if you were a cop and you arrested me, you might tell me my rights. You might not. You might just hit me with a billy club. There was no right or wrong.
Right.
So one of the things that codified, that's where those Miranda cards come from. Every officer who arrests a suspect knows to read. Either they know it by heart or they read the cards. And when you look at a show like Law and Order, well, you hear that admonition. There's 466 episodes of Law and Order. You hear it 466 times. You ought to know what it means, right? Because if you don't know, it just looks like they got the guy who's guilty and now he says, I don't want to talk, and the cops go do something else. Really not that simple.
Yeah. It's amazing to think that something so common in pop culture, is something that we really don't know that much about. Oh, no.
What's even more shocking is most lawyers don't know. That you don't know or I don't know, okay. But that a lot of lawyers don't know. Not that they don't know the law, but they don't know the genesis of Miranda. The whole, I've spoken a couple of times to Miranda's arresting officer. And Miranda, and he admitted, he said, Miranda never said we did anything wrong. We never hit him. We never abused him. That was the way the system was. You picked the guy up. Maybe you'd see him in his 6 months. Maybe you wouldn't. We'd lie to him. That was the system.
Yeah.
So it also brought the Bill of Rights the federal. You always had the Bill of Rights on a federal level, but there's 50 states, and the Bill of Rights didn't apply equally in all 50 states.
Mhm.
So it created an even playing field. Everybody knows the rules. The cops, the bad guys, the lawyers, the prosecutor, they all know the rules.
Mhm.
And as it turned out, science has made the confession less, the heart of the whole case.
Yeah. 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 That's incredible. That's incredible. Well, I just wanted to get you on the call real quick for this because I know that it was sort of a timely thing. You had a unique perspective on it that most people don't. And so, I thought, for some of your listeners, that would be kind of interesting in the whole scope of your career. So that's really exciting that you would share that. And I'll put the link to the book down below. People should definitely check it out. And yeah, I appreciate it very much.
I appreciate you, Vince, and the opportunity to talk about this. And in another day, if you want to know what happened to me with the police, you may want to edit this out.
Okay. Well, if you're going to put that invite out, then that's a hard yes. That's exciting. Very cool. Well, thank you, Joe, very much. And
Thanks,
we will talk very, very soon and have more good stuff for the listeners coming soon.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.